Aloha and welcome back to my channel. I'm Marilyn, aka Maya, the baby boomer booktuber, and today I'm going to do a deep dive into a book that I'm obsessed with, and it's Agatha Christie's A Caribbean Mystery. I'm not going to do a review of this book. I'm actually going to get into what I learned about Agatha Christie by this book. And to start, I'm going to quote another author, a Norwegian author, Cora Sandell. And in Paris Review, she wrote, "In everything one writes, there is woven in a thread from one's own life. It can be so hidden that nobody notices it, but it is there and it must be there. I suppose it is to be seen as a piece of living writing." I really believe that. And I believe that you can find out about an author between the lines, so to speak. And I enjoy doing that. I don't know if it's because I enjoy mysteries or I enjoy finding out about people, but I enjoy finding out about one of my favorite authors, who is Agatha Christie, the most read book besides Shakespeare and the Bible. And this book, Caribbean Mystery, was written when she was in her late 60s. So another thing about this book is that she's in the West Indies, or the Caribbean as it says, and she doesn't have the network of the small town in England that she usually has. So she has to really become a detective, an active detective in this book, which is very fascinating. I recommend that you read this book. I'm going to give a spoiler, but I'm going to let you know before I say the spoiler. Okay, so the name of my this video was Agatha Christie Woke. I'm not a person to answer that question, but I do have, and I'll tell you later, an African American writer who wrote an article in Medium that was very interesting. So I will tell you that later. But let's start with what I learned about Agatha Christie from just reading this book. And it really does show that she did a lot of changing. So this takes place on a fictional island called Saint Honoré. I don't think it exists. I think it's fictional. But it's Trinidad and Tobago are mentioned in this book, which were formerly British-ruled islands. So I'm thinking it might refer to an island, either one of those two islands or another one. So she's definitely out of her comfort zone. Her nephew has sent her to recover from pneumonia. And so what did I find out? I'm going to start that there's a diverse cast of characters in this book. There's Senora Caspiaro from Venezuela. There's two Cubans, one named, first named, and even a Puerto Rican, which surprised me. There is what she calls a black West Indian girl who has a pretty big part in the book. And I think that that's different for her, and I will talk more about that. Yes, she does go into a few iffy areas by saying that the black girl had beautiful white teeth, which is not, done right now. It's not a good thing to say about a person to talk about their physical appearances regarding their race. So, but this was in the 60s. So, like I'm saying, she might be a little woke, but not totally. Okay, so I'm going to start with sex, which you don't usually think of when you think of Agatha Christie. Okay, so on page 2, her nephew had sent her a book. Well, he's always sending her books to read. And this is what she says. Modern books, so difficult, all about such unpleasant people, doing such very odd things, and not apparently even enjoying them. Sex as a word had not been mentioned in Miss Marple's young days, but there had been plenty of it, not talked about so much, but enjoyed far more than nowadays, or so it seemed to her. Though usually labeled sin, she couldn't help feeling that was preferable to what it seemed to be nowadays, a kind of duty. So she's glancing at a book, and this is really funny. So she's reading. Do you mean that you've had no sexual experience at all? Demanded the young man incredulously. At 19? But you must. It's vital. The young girl hung her head unhappily. Her straight, greasy hair fell forward over her face. I know, she muttered. I know. He looked at her stained old jersey, the bare feet, the dirty toenails, the smell of rancid fat. He wondered why he found her so maddeningly attractive. Miss Marple wondered too. And really, to have sex experience urge on you exactly as though it was an iron tonic? Poor young things. So I thought that was very much how Agatha Christie felt about what was happening in the 60s. And I thought that that made-up fictional part was very apropos to what her feelings were toward the new sex liberation. And I think this was 66, 65, so it wasn't totally the my time yet. But anyway, I thought that was very revealing. All right, music. She's in this resort. There's a multitude of people there, and diverse people, and she doesn't like steel bands. She thinks they're loud, and she doesn't like them. But toward the end of the book, she says, well, I'm getting used to steel bands. I think I can really start to like them. So I thought that was a way that she was changing. She's not stuck. All right, now number 3 is religion. At the end of the book, she's reading a devotional book that's very popular by someone I didn't know who it was. His name is Thomas A. Campbell. And he was a canon of the oh, here he is. All right. Thomas von Kempel, he's Dutch, was a German-Dutch canon, which I'm thinking is a priest, regular of the late medieval period, and the author of The Imitation of Christ, one of the most popular and best-known Christian devotional books. His name means Thomas of Kempen, Kempen being his hometown. And he was a member of the modern devotion, a spiritual movement during the late medieval period. So I didn't know anything about this. She's reading the book toward the end. She's very worried during this whole book because she doesn't know if she can stop a murder or not. And I will get into that later. But anyway, Thomas Campbell, I was reading some quotes by him. And I found one, or maybe two, that might really show how she drew one of her characters, Poirot. And he said, without the way, there is no going. Without the truth, there is no knowing. Without the life, there is no living. So we know how Monsieur Hercule Poirot felt about the truth. So I'm thinking that Agatha Christie feels the same way about the truth, and she found it, or she keeps herself spiritual, or by reading this devotional book. He also wrote Man proposes but God disposes, which even I heard of. Later on in the book, I'm talking about Caribbean Mystery, she's also quotes Isaiah from the Bible, 6:8. And she didn't quote the first part of it. Also, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, she didn't say that part, but she did say, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And this is showing in the book she's worrying about finding the murder, and how is she going to do it? How is she going to do it by herself? Okay, she's also interested in Shakespeare, and she quotes Shakespeare when the first person dies, and she quotes Macbeth. Duncan is in his grave. After life's fitful fever, he sleeps well. She's trying to make herself, okay, this person has died. There's nothing I can do. But of course, she, even though she says that, she said, no, I have to do something. I have to. I can't just let it be. And there goes the other quote, whom shall I send? And who shall go for us? When she gets very stressed out during the latter part of the book. There's even something about feminism that I caught in this one book of Agatha Christie. She has Senora Caspiaro, which I never heard that. She's a Venezuelan woman who's a very interesting character in the book, and becomes sort of an important clue for Jane Marple finding the murderer. And she has her saying, oh, here it is, how ugly are old men. They should all be put to death after 40. No, 35. So I thought that was really cute, and really speaks to a little bit about feminism. She also has another feminist saying in the book, and it says she felt sorry for women who were vulnerable to time. Miss Marple was not vulnerable to time. She didn't care that she was an old woman. She knew she was smart, and she had to play the fool. And at one point she's saying in the book, what a fool I sound, because she was like trying to play the old dithering old, the dithering old maid, but she knew she was smart. Okay, so this is just some of the things I found out by reading A Caribbean Mystery. Now let's go on to Was She Woke? Agatha Christie has written many books that had racist tropes in them, or at least racist words. In fact, one of her books, And Then There Were None, was originally 10 little N-words, which is terrible. But she didn't come up with this title. This was an actual nursery rhyme. It was accepted to be racist. And as this African American writer in Medium says, what's so unusual about racist people saying racist things at the time? But they changed the name. I guess when she knew better, she became better. I'm not sure. I wasn't around during this time. But I will say that, of course, they changed the name to 10 Little Indians, and that was also racist, so then they changed it to Then There Were One. There was also the anti-Semitic, in fact, the Defamation League wrote for her to stop using racist tropes. And that brings me to an important part of what I wanted to say. There is a character in the book named Mr. Raphael, which plays a big part in solving the murder. Of course, Miss Marple ends up solving the murder, but he is a close friend of hers by the end. And so the new owners of the resort are having a conversation, and they're talking about Mr. Raphael. And Miss Marple said, well, invalids are frequently difficult. And the person says, I didn't mean only that. It's very well paid and you expect to put up with a good deal of crotchiness. Old Raphael's not really a bad sort. I mean more that he hesitated. Miss Marple looked inquiring. Well, how shall I put it? It's difficult for him socially. People are so damn snobbish. There's no one here of his class. He's better than a servant and below the average visitor, or they think he is, rather like the Victorian governess. Even the secretary woman, Mrs. Walters, feels she's a cut above him. Makes things difficult. And so when I saw Mr. Raphael, I thought, that sounds like a Jewish name to me. And I looked it up, and it's a name of Hebrew origin meaning. So maybe that's what they were talking about when they said that he didn't fit in and they were snobbish about him. But I looked up the original Hebrew meaning, and it says he has healed. That's what Raphael means. He has healed. And I'm just going to tell you to read the book to find out if that makes any sense to you. Now the part where I try to get in a little bit if Agatha Christie became, as millennials say, woke or not. And there's two parts in the book where there's a black girl who works at the hotel, and she's accused sort of blackmail. And in two places of the book, one where the inspector says it and one where Miss Marple says it. She mayn't have thought of it as blackmail, said Miss Marple. In these large hotels, there are often things the maids know that some people would rather not have repeated, and so they hand out a larger tip or a little present or money. The girl possibly didn't realize at first the importance of what she knew. And in another place, Daventry, the detective who's brought in on the case, says, probably not. I think he'd be more nervous of anything of the kind. And I'd say, too, that what she did know wasn't very much, but enough for blackmail? I don't know that I'd even call it that. I doubt if the girl would even understand the word. Payment for being discreet isn't thought of as blackmail. You see, some of the people who stay here are the rich playboy lot, and their morals won't bear much investigation. His voice was slightly scathing. We get all kinds, I agree. A woman, maybe, doesn't want it known that she's sleeping around, so she gives a present to the girl who waits on her. It's tacitly understood that the payment's for discretion. And these are black detectives who are in charge of Saint Honoré. So two places she's defending the girl that was doing some snooping, who found something, and let's just put it that way because I don't want to give away anything. I'm going to give a spoiler in just a little while. But before I do that, I said I wasn't qualified to say if Agatha Christie was woke or not. In this Kay Kendall, in this Medium article, says, periodically I've wondered at my preference for Agatha. What does a twice-married British descendant of gentlewomen have to do with a never-married American descendant of slaves? Yes, we share a sense of humor. She once said that the benefit of having an archaeologist Sir Max Mallowan as a husband is that the older you get, the more interested in you he becomes. She goes on to discuss many of the racist things that were said in Agatha Christie's books. Here's one example. I'm not going to go into all of them. They liked dogs and disliked cats. They both hated oysters and loved smoked salmon. They liked Greta Garbo and disliked Katharine Hepburn. They disliked loud voices, noisy restaurants, and Negroes. They preferred buses to tubes. Hold on, what the hell? You can imagine how my mind skidded to a halt as I was saying to myself, hey, I don't like loud voices, noisy restaurants, and whoa! So, I'd made note, she continues, I'd made note of but moved past these insults to blacks, browns, Asians, and even Italians. But I also noted the fact that once changed, Dame Agatha changed for the rest of her career. For whatever reason, she was no longer cavalier about race. This beacons hope for others who seem equally cavalier in our own time, or not. Though flawed, she seemed to have been decent from the start. Maybe that has made all the difference. So, like I said, this is only one opinion, of course, and I will have it linked in the show notes. But it does give us a mirror into Agatha Christie and how she was born in the 1800s and during the and she was also born into a upper middle class British family. And there was colonialism and things she heard and things she didn't understand. And maybe as she got older, she became better. As she knew more, she became better. I love Agatha Christie, and I'm sure other people do too. Okay, now for the spoiler. I'm going to give you 5 seconds, and I'm going to tell you how I figured out. Even though I read this before, I read it so many years ago that I didn't know who did it. But then, and this is related to what I'm talking about. How did I find out who did it? Okay. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds. This is how I found out who committed the crime. On page 98, the murderer says, "Don't say that. Persecution mania. People always say that about people. Just because maybe she's a bit nervy. Coming out here to the West Indies, all the dark faces, people are rather queer sometimes about the West Indies and colored people." So she made the murderer a racist. And that's how I figured out who committed the murder, just by that alone. I hope you enjoyed my video of my deep dive into Agatha Christie. I really enjoy learning more about authors that I respect or like. And I think that some of the things that I found out weren't even in biographies that were written about Agatha Christie. So you too, reader of Agatha Christie, can figure out a lot, or reader of anyone actually, if you really like an author, you can really find out a lot. So until next time, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, and I will be back with more discussions, more hauls, more everything. So until we meet again, my friend, I love you all, and aloha.